Today we'll have another presentation for our ARE seminar series. Dr. Nguyen will present about conservation auction in the presence of spatially endogenous bonus, a landscape approach for biodiversity conservation. Just a little bit about Chi. She did her PhD here at the University of Western Australia, and after working for almost 4 years in Germany, she's back as a research fellow in the School of Agriculture and Environment, Department of Agricultural and Resource Economics. So I welcome Chi to give us her research presentation. So thank you, Chi, for coming in.
Thank you, Tafisis, and thank you everyone for joining me in the talk today. I feel like I have my first day being back here with the first meeting with the school, and now with my first seminar here. And also say thank you to those who are watching me remotely as well. So as you can see, this is about my talk today. So it's kind of a long title. So this is a joint work with Professor Uwe Lakashuma from Q University, where we received the funding from the EFFECT project. So this work paper actually includes two research objectives, but I will select just one of them to present today and spend time open the floor for you to discuss. And if you're interested in, I can give another seminars on the second objective or other things. So let me get started by explaining why we're interested in landscape scale environmental management for biodiversity conservation, and then explaining what should we mean by spatially endogenous bonus. So to address biodiversity loss, ARE environmental scheme AES has been put in place to financially incentivize farmers to set their land aside for conservation, so to reduce intensifications of agricultural activities on private farmland. So assuming that we have these stylized agricultural land areas where each farmer owns one parcel of farmland. So the question is, what is the best way to allocate contracts to farmers? So given the fact that the information about opportunity cost or income foregone from implementing conservation actions is known by individual landholders, but this information is hidden to the regulators. And regarding this, the information, conversely, the information about environmental values or the scoring rules is the private information of the regulators, but this information usually landholders have no access to it. So due to this, the information asymmetry between the regulators and landholders, the regulator often risks overcompensating landholder for their conservation effort, which generate low environmental benefit. So to address these issues, conservation auctions has been widely promoted as a cost-effective mechanism to allocate conservation contracts to farmers. So as a cost revaluations mechanism. So how do auctions work? So here back to this example, then farmers now put in a bid to reflect their willingness to accept for taking their land out of productions. So as you can see here, assuming that we have a spatial configuration of offered parcels look like this, where the green one are the offered parcels, because participation is on voluntary basis. So some can opt out of the scheme. And then the government often faced with a very limited budget. What they're going to do is to have to run a selections process. And under conventional auctions, the government often target the parcels that can generate highest environmental values per dollar spent until their budget is exhausted. But this farm scale targeting approach, then we highly likely end up with a spatial configuration of selected parcels look like this, because you just focus on target on parcels that can generate highest environmental outcome Barolo span. So you got the selected partial kind of fragmented across landscape. Or in other words, we end up with a fragmented conserved habitat. And this has been criticized as one of the key issues inhibiting AES from achieving its full potential effectiveness. And that's why when we read the literatures about the performance of AES over the last 3 decades, we often observe very poor performance, low additionalities. So this is one of the reasons the literature has pointed out. Then, and because from the biological evidence, they're showing that the environmental values is higher when the two neighboring partials enroll in the programs than to just take simple sum of the individual environmental value of fragmented partials. So to achieve more like landscape scale environmental outcome, we need to promote spatial coordinations of conservation efforts. So we can select more contiguity partials across the landscape so that we can achieve more like a conservation sceneries effect of the effort. So therefore, to promote spatial coordinations, economics has brought up an innovative mechanisms, namely spatially targeted conservation auctions. So with these auctions now, the auction will rank the bid according to an environmental scoring rule which capture the ecological gains of spatial coordinations in the selections process. So they assume that we have this spatial configuration of offered partials. Now with the environmental scoring rules which incorporate spatial coordination component, the literature suggests that we end up with more aggregated conserved habitat. So you can see we achieve more like contiguities of conserved farmland. So that's the provisions of many ecosystem services like the establishment of wildlife habitat or water purification services require the spatial coordinations of conservation effort to effectively deliver environmental outcome. So that we see how important it is. And in terms of auction design, this is one way to address the issues in the selections process. But that's in terms of auction design. Then the next question is, when it comes to auction implementations, the question arises, should we review the information about spatially environmental scoring rules to farmers or not? Should we do it or shouldn't? What we expect is that if we review these environmental scoring rules, this have bidders to constructing and submitting their bid. That is highly likely more well aligned with the auctioneer preferences because now they know what the regulator wants. So more information. At the same time, when this landholder, they are aware of the contiguity benefit of spatial coordinations, then they may raise the bid to take advantages of the high quality of service that they offer. Or in other words, that now with this information, this enable bidders to endogenously make a better informed decisions on rent premium. They can determine the monetary bonus for the extra service that they offer. So that's what we mean by endogenous. So that's why we refer the reviewment of spatially environmental scoring rules as a spatially endogenous bonus approach to induce agglomerations of conserved farmlands. So it is different from what we call exogenous bonus approach, where the regulator exogenously decide bonus size. So like the scheme, what we call agglomerations bonus scheme, so that's kind of exogenous bonus approach. And here what we're studying is endogenous bonus approach. And within the effect project, we did another study looking at exogenous bonus approach as well. And then we bring them together and see which one works better and under what conditions. Okay, so let's continue with this, but when we look into the literatures of spatially endogenous bonus approach, we found very scant literatures working on the performance of this kind of endogenous approach. And it's very interesting that we found no agreement about the effect of reviewing environmental scoring rules in general and reviewing spatially environmental scoring rules. Only 2 papers look at that, and also they didn't reach any consensus on auctions performance with the inclusions of this endogenous approach. So this why expresses the need for elucidating the conditions under which the spatially endogenous approach could improve or impair auctions performance. And we follow this core and carry out a research, which we aim to examine the effect of a spatially endogenous bonus on auctions performance by looking at its performance across 3 types of landscape. So what we mean by across different type of landscape configurations. So landscape now is classified by 2 main contextual factors. One is the opportunity cost, OC, and environmental values, EV. So OC reflecting the income foregone from agricultural productions, and EVs is the unit of environmental benefit that can generated when the land is retired. And the empirical evidence, so in reality, is to show that the spatial configuration, spatial correlations between these 2 contextual factors could be uncorrelated, they could be negatively correlated or positively correlated. Let's take an example here with the landscape. What we call a negative landscape type is when the parcels has high environmental values in the negative landscape, so they can be very low cost, can achieve at the low cost. So the characteristic of the parcels in this landscape type is with the high environmental parcels, they are likely to be low cost parcels. So that's negatively correlated. Or here, if you have a very high environmental parcel, so it is highly likely to be a high cost parcels as well. So we look at the performance of a spatial endogenous bonus across the 3 types of landscape and see under what type of landscape this kind of bonus work best. So that's the aim of the study. So one research objective. So to achieve the research objective, we carry out an online lab experiment via Z3 and LIST. So the initial plans was doing in the lab physically, but the pandemic occurs, and then we have to switch to doing this online with 180 students from Faculty of Agriculture at Keele University. And we run the lottery games, conservation auctions game, and some questionnaire survey at the end. So one session lasts around 2 hours for a student. So we follow the 2, like between subject design 2 by 3 here. So we vary the spatial configurations of landscape, uncorrelated, negative, and positive landscape type with the actions and results of the bonus. So this is the experimental results we presented to the subject in the experiment. So this stylized agricultural landscape we set up to mimic the problem of habitat fragmentations in reality. So as you can see here, the 2 big green areas represent 2 habitat areas. They are fragmented from each other due to the intensification of agricultural activities on farmland. And these farmland owned by 6 landholders, so 6 subjects. So each subject owns 6 parcels of farmland. So for instance, subject ID 1 owns parcels from 1 to 6. And subject 5 parcels from 25 to 30 so this is how the landscape look like. And its partials is assigned an opportunity cost and an environmental value. So we did the calibrations to introduce heterogeneity in the opportunity cost values and also environmental values. And the subject was informed of, so they know the opportunity cost of their own partials, but not those of others. And in terms of environmental values, we didn't review the absolute values. Instead, we reviewed the relative values. So by telling the subject that the partial that's closest to the habitats can generate higher environmental value than those that is furthest to the habitat. Or in other words, the partial located in zone 1 and zone 4 is considered as a high environmental value zones relative to zone 2 and 3. So that's what we inform the subject. So we present a color-coded map. So they depicting the relative environmental values across zones. Then we told the subject that, well, the general management goals of the government is try to build in a connectivity between these two habitats to facilitate the movement of wildlife species by establishing corridors or stepping stones. Then corridors, we say, is formed when the two horizontally four parcels are connected horizontally. This is form a corridor. That's how we define. And the government also buy in stepping stone as well. So they value stepping stone. By stepping stone, we mean also single parcels, one parcels, or it can be the combinations of 2 or 3 horizontal parcels. So we have single parcel, 2 parcel stepping stone, and 3 parcel stepping stone. That's what we call it. So the government values, they can buy any offers. That's the general descriptions of the management goal. Well, when it's come to now, the government have to run the selections process, how it's work behind the scene. So the government now they need to select corridors and stepping stone. And the main objective is to generate the highest environmental values per dollar spent. So now look at the management objective functions. Let's say now we have a corridor J or a stepping stone J. So the government had to formalize by computing this total environmental values that's comprised of 2 components. The first component is the sum of the individual environmental values of the parcels belong to those corridors. So for example, we have a corridor, then 4 parcels are part of it. We take sum of the environmental values of those parcels. That's the first part. The second part, this component represents ecological gains from spatial coordinations. So this case is a constant. And here is NJ is reflecting the numbers of parcels set aside for conservation. Let's say if this is a single parcel, that's this is equal to 1, and then we have this ecological gain is equal to 0. So no gain for if you submit an offer at a single parcel because no connectivity, right? And as you go to 3 or 3 plus stepping stone or corridors, you get that this ecological gain with we set up a square here, just reflecting increasing marginal environmental benefits if you get the connectivity is getting longer. So this is how the environmental option management objective look like, and where we can the government capture the ecological gains in their objective functions. And of course, this is subject to the budget B, and we told the subject that the government faced with a limited budget, they couldn't accommodate on the bid, so they will select the corridors or stepping stone that can generate highest environmental values per dollar spent. Well, here in the conservation auction, again, we run a multiple rounds auctions with unknown ending point. Unknown ending point would mean that we don't review how many rounds of the auctions, but we told the subject that one of the rounds will be selected for the final payments in real euro. So this is the procedure how we run in the lab, where we set the budget, and when auctions start, as I said, we announce the general environmental goals on the subject. Then before going to the stage where farmer putting in a bid, they are given communication option. So the novelties of our experiment design relative to what I've done in the literature is that this communication is set at optional and costly. What does this mean by optional? This means that the subject can opt out. Like, I don't want to communicate, because the purpose of this communication stage is to allow landholders to coordinate in bidding strategy with the other subject to build corridors or to come up with any bidding strategy together. But this reflects the willingness to incur transaction costs when you participate in an auctions. And when we set it at an optional, this means that, well, you can, if you're willing to incur this cost, then you can spend, because we set it 15 experimental dollars per neighbor they communicate with. Otherwise, you can just opt out. No, I just make decisions on my own. I don't need to coordinate with anyone. So this one part of this paper, we look at factors affecting this willingness to incur transaction costs, because it's an important part for studying AES participations as well. Okay, so we cross this, then farmers go to the stage where they can now decide whether they would like to submit the bid. And as you know, each farmer owns 6 parcels of farmland, so they can decide how many parcels they would like to offer. Okay, they can be just completely opt out. So they can go offer from 1 to 6 numbers of parcels. And we introduce submission fee here. So each parcel you submit is cost you is 10 experimental dollars. So just to mimic the transaction cost for preparing and submitting bid in reality. Then, well, on the bid, gather on the bid, then the government now running the selections process, and they announce the winners and the results. And then farmer, the results here, we provide a map showing which parcels were selected in this round of the auctions. And we show the earning, that's the individual subject earned from that round. Then subject can learn from previous round, and they can change bidding strategy if they wish to before joining into the next round. They jump into communication again and go again with this procedure at the end of this round. That is the procedure for the no bonus treatment. And when we run the endogenous bonus treatment, we add in the information about the environmental scoring rules is reviewed to the subject. But I want to highlight we in this experimental setup, we only inform the abstract informations of the environmental scoring rules by saying that, okay, so the government buying on the either corridors or stepping stone, but they prefers the higher connectivities of the conserved farmland. This means they place higher values on corridors than stepping stone, or the longer the connectivity, the higher environmental values the government will place on. So this express the preferences, the review preferences, but we didn't review the detail of the objective functions, the weight we put on. So we didn't review the TEV functions I showed in the previous slide in detail. So just an abstract information of the scoring rules.
I'll just ask a clarification.
Yeah.
When you said the farmers receive the auction results, you said did you say that they find out what everybody earned or just their own earnings?
No, just their own earning, but they know which partials were successfully selected. Yeah. Yeah, so please ask me a questions as I go if there's anything that is not clear to you.
Can I do that then?
Yeah.
So in the first version, where just the general, but there was no sort of stepping stone value, and they weren't, and it was neither told them nor implemented. Mm-hmm. So the first version, there was no stepping stone value, and the farmers obviously weren't told it. And in the second one, there was a stepping stone value or a corridor value, and they were told about it.
No,
right?
I mean in the let's say the baseline treatment. In the baseline treatment, they were told that in the general environmental goal that farmers will buy in corridors and stepping stone. So either they offer corridor, okay, offer stepping stone is okay as well, but we didn't review that how the government go into select it. So they didn't know auctioneer preferences as a way that how they select it. That's what it means.
The preferences are the same in both. It's just
the same in both in the design, but it's behind the scene. But what the informations we review to the bidder is just the general one in the baseline treatment, and this is in the endogenous bonus treatment review. But the setup is the same for the two things. So the remain the same environmental objective functions for both.
Don't have an endogenous bonus.
So that's why we only test the effect of reviewing the informations, the abstract informations to bidders. Yep. So now it's come to results. So I cut a little bit with the analysis with others variable because we have social, demographic, and environmental attitude, risk attitude as well. But I want to focus on what we're going to discuss with the effect of endogenous bonus on the auctions performance today.
Before you go on, so just from where we've just been, this endogenous bonus is not measuring whether there's an endogenous bonus on the next page. So in the second line of your table, no, go forward. Back to the results.
Yeah.
Neither endogenous bonus. It's described as endogenous bonus, but from what we just said, is it not endogenous bonus revealed?
Yeah.
Is that what it's really?
So,
because they've all got an endogenous bonus, haven't they?
So here, well, the term that we come up with. So here, the equivalent of endogenous bonus is, okay, that's equivalent to reviewing the environmental scoring rules. When we review the environmental scoring rules, then now the bidder endogenously determine the bonus on the O's, right? So they know that here, this is how the quality services, they can like put in, like, okay, I ask for more. And there is the one who decides how much they would like to have with the additional service that they provide. So that's why we term it as endogenous bonus.
I think it's a confusing label.
Yeah.
Because it makes it feel like there might be a bonus or there might not be a bonus in terms of the payments provided.
Yeah.
Whereas in fact there's always a bonus.
Yeah. So where in the case where we have exogenous bonus, so why we come up with the idea for endogenous bonus? Because when you, okay, now the regulator decide if you put in two partials together adjacents, I pay you top up this amount of money. That's the exogenous bonus. But it's very difficult for the government to come up with the appropriate bonus size to impose on exogenously. That's why here, when we review and we look and observe whether how much people ask for this extra services that they provide. But we make it clear in the paper that, okay, we mean it by endogenous bonus like this. So we divide it, yeah.
I guess the point is not it's the terminology. In both the baseline and then your bonus round, you have the bonus anyway. It's whether it's reviewed or not. I think that's the point
Yeah.
David's mentioned.
Yeah, I would just put endogenous bonus revealed in
That's the treatment, specifically definition of the treatment.
Yeah.
But there's something else. In the treatment where it's not revealed, and the unconscious one is still there, because you're feeding back the results after every round, there could be a possibility that after a while, they will realize that certain configurations are better paid than others. So there's a learning effect. And so if you compare with and without the revealing in the first round and compare them at the sixth round later on, the differences should become smaller.
Yeah, I will show you in a minute. Yeah. But it's very, I think it's well, you are right, the bonus is always there. But when the question is when we review this information, whether we accelerate the rank-seeking rates in this case. So will you ask for more because you know that you're offering high quality service, rather than when you don't know whether my service is high quality or not.
Might or may not relevant. I think the endogeneity bit is always in there. It's the degree of endogeneity. In your baseline, it's still endogenous. Because they can multiple round, they can learn, they can process the information that be endogenous in their next round decision. But in the second treatment, in your treatment state, you have a stronger endogeneity. You enforce, okay, this is it. You can legitimately get the information and endogenous into your decision.
Yeah, I agree with this point.
We now know how to interpret it.
Yeah. So, but yeah, I agree with this point. The endogenous bonus is always there. Well, so now things clear. Let's continue. Well, so you can see the setup. We have the data at auction level, individual level, and partials level. So we analyze the data according to different levels. So I show you here today with some key results. First, we start with the auction level. Examine whether endogenous bonus review have an effect on auctions performance. And auctions performance is measured in terms of 3 performance criteria. So here is a markup. So show how much individual bidders inflate their bid relative to the opportunity cost. And the spatial coordinations measures by number of connected partials. Let's say if you offer 1 corridor, so number of connected partials is 4. And cost effectiveness measures in terms of the cost incurs to produce 1 unit of environmental benefit. So it means that we prefer the lowest values of this, so that the scheme more cost effective. Okay, so let's now look at the endogenous bonus variable. So we didn't see any stat there. So this just means that when we review the information about the government preferences, we didn't see any effect on any of the performance criteria. So it didn't have any effect on bidding behavior, neither degree of spatial coordinations or cost effectiveness of the programs. But very interesting that we observe the effect of landscape type on auctions performance. So landscape, we include 2 dummy variables here, a negative and positive landscape with the baseline is uncorrelated one. And what we observe here is you look as the negative landscape, so we can see that is actually intensified rank seeking in this landscape type. And we get a kind of lower degree of spatial coordination relative to uncorrelated landscape. And as a result, in this negative landscape type is performed poorly in terms of cost effectiveness. But if we look, now we interacted with endogenous bonus in the present. It seems that in presence of this bonus, is mitigate the differences in auctions performance between these 2 types of landscape. Similarly, we observe the same thing in positive landscape is performed poorly than uncorrelated landscape type, although we didn't find any significant difference in cost effectiveness. Conversely, now when we introduce endogenous bonus, we found that is make the differences between the performance in the uncorrelated and positive landscape type is now more rank-seeking rate and also lower degree of spatial coordinations. So we can see a signal that, okay, so when we introduce this kind of endogenous bonus, it's not always the good things, and there is some kind of different reactions from the beaters if they face with different landscape type. So this is lead us to the next step. Okay, now we know the directions. It seems that it improved in the intensity, like the rank, like attenuate the rank-seeking rate in negative landscape type, but it's kind of enhanced in the positive landscape type. We know the directions, but to what extent this endogenous bonus affect on individual, on the beating behavior. We then look at the data more closely in each type of landscape to see. Now we run a man-Whitney U test. This test to compare the differences in means, markup rate, spatial coordinations, and cost effectiveness. Look at in each type of landscape in the absence and presence of the bonus. Okay, so now we look at a markup. We see that in the presence of the bonus, can help to reduce rank-seeking rate, reducing from roughly 40%, the markup rate to 31%, and the result is a significant difference. And we observe the same tendencies happen in the negative landscape type, where it can have reduced markup rate in negative landscape, but with the weak, I think the effect is weaker relative to this uncorrelated landscape. By contrast, if you look at positive landscape type, we observe different effect. Like now is the presence of bonus is accelerates or foster rank-seeking rates in this landscape type. So we really observe contradicting results from the effect of this bonus. When you look at spatial coordinations, again, we expect that when we introduce this bonus, we could increase the degree of spatial coordinations, and this is actually what we observe in uncorrelated landscape and negative landscape, but that's not what happened in positive landscape type. In terms of cost effectiveness, we didn't find any significant effect of the bonus on these negative and positive landscape type. But in uncorrelated landscape, the endogenous bonus significantly improve the cost effectiveness of programs. So overall, we observe the conflicting results that might help us to explain that maybe these contradicting results cancel out each other, and that's why when we look back, when we put the data together, then we didn't observe the significant effect of the endogenous bonus when we didn't disentangle three types of landscape. Well, then now it's come to Steve's comments on learning effect. What we're looking at the individual beating behaviors with the markup rate. So you see here on the top rows is we look at the effect of learning, and what we found is beater seek higher rank over time. So maybe they could learn from the previous round and can strategically capture higher rank in the current round. If you look at, if we interact round with bonus, the presence of endogenous bonus seem to curb the tendencies that the beater shows high rank here, because the associated coefficients become non-significant. become non-significant in this case. We still, at the individual beta level, we also observe the effect of, oh, I think I need this. Well, so this landscape type still affect on the marker rate, whereas we observe. And again here, if you look at the bonus when we interact with positive landscape, is intensify marker rate. Why the presence of this bonus kind of attenuate this random seeking rates in a negative landscape. From the beginning, if you remember the designs, we have a different environmental zones. So we have zone 1 and 4, high EV zone and low EV zones in the middles. And when we look at the literatures, there's two kind of school of thought and some empirical evidence showing that, okay, if farmer, if they know that they are offering their land with high environmental values, they go in to ask for more. So the rent markups is very high. But on the other side, there's some studies showing that no, it's not necessarily the case. Farmers can still offer farm land if they know it's environmental values and they didn't ask for a significant increase in the markup. So we found a different contrasting empirical evidence on it. And we now turn back to this, our design. We think whether this landscape configurations can help elaborate anything on this ongoing debate. That's why we run the analysis to look at the effect of environmental zones on a markup rate. And of course, this run as a partials level. So the data is clustered as a partials level. With this is the key variables we looking at. So with the environmental zones called high for zone 1 and zone 4 and lows for zone 2 and 3 in the middles. So what we found is that as suggested by the literatures, that means that in the high environmental partials, we observe a higher markup rate. But, now if you look at when we interact with landscape type, with the negative landscape type, I think the results show that this behavior is intensified. So they ask for more if they face with negative landscape type. But very interesting that we found this side. So is this negative? Negative means that now when in the high environmental zones, partials in the positive landscape time, they actually ask for lower markup rate than the low EV zones. One of the explanations for this would be because in the positive landscape type, the high environmental partials are also likely to be high cost partials. So with the high cost partials, farmers likely to ask less rent, even though they locate in the high environmental parcels. So some literature showing that farmers' decisions is based on the opportunity cost, and they will ask for higher rent if they face with low opportunity cost. They ask for more rent relative to the case where they faces with higher opportunity cost. Then when we look at the presence of endogenous bonus in this negative landscape type, we didn't find a significant effect here. But the positive landscape type, the endogenous bonus, is accelerates rent seeking, and we found in the previous analysis. But when we introduce the bonus, so then this becomes insignificant. So this means that when in the presence of the bonus, now there is no significant difference in the markup rate between the highs and low environmental zones in this positive landscape type. So they may know the critical locations of the middle parcels. That's why, and also to enhance what we call is the winning probability. So if you want to get your corridors in, you might get to reduce the rent-seeking rate on your parcels as well. So it somehow is enhance the competitive biddings when we introduce the endogenous bonus. That is one of the explanations when we back to this analysis. When we introduce this, we observe the rent-seeking rates reduce over time. Okay, so now I come up with a key finding. That's the effectiveness, as we can see, that the endogenous bonus will depend on landscape configurations. And this is the key message to bring home, so that we can see the interplay between landscape configurations and the spatially endogenous bonus can set the desirabilities of adopting this spatially endogenous bonus approach or not. So it depends on, because we should take this as a very cautious, because this could be very effective approach to improve auctions performance if under the uncorrelated or negative landscape type, but it could backfire on auctions performance if in the case of the positive landscape. So the question is, so what? So this is the key message to bring home, and I will open this, open the floor for you to discuss, and I can, I can mention a little bit about the relate to what we observe in the reality. So in the reality, actually, for example, in Australia, we have a bush tender where the aim is to reduce nitrogen leaching from agriculture. And in this last auctions, actually the government withhold the information about the environmental values regarding the land management options. So they withhold the information. But in the other conservation auctions in the US, the biggest one is the conservation reserve programs. So they have the environmental scoring rule called, they compute environmental benefit index. And this environmental benefit index comprise of 5 components for environmental component management requirement, 1 cost component, and the other component they call conservation priority area. So conservation's priority, so each component they impose a different weight, and they compute an environmental benefit index. So this is exactly the environmental scoring rules. But in these programs, the auctioneer reviews the abstract information about the environmental scoring rules. So unlike in a bush tender programs. But the different things from ours look at spatial coordination component. And in the conservation reserve programs in the US, they introduce priority area just as spatial targeting. And spatial targeting is different from spatial coordinations. You can achieve spatial targeting, but not necessarily you achieve spatial coordination. So that's something for the future work. We can look at the strategy for information disclosures policies in the real auctions. Yeah, so that's all for my presentations today.
Thank you. I think we have a couple of minutes for 2 or 3 questions, if there are from audiences, from the audience, yeah, online and yeah. Okay.
Just to clarify the landscape types. Negative landscape types, low cost, low value type, right?
And negative and low cost, high value. So that's negative correlation.
So sorry, negative means low cost, high value.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's correlation. It's a
Okay.
Correlation.
And positive, low cost, low value.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes, yes.
Okay, I got 2 predictions wrong.
Sorry, I didn't make it clear.
There was some information in this information theory.
When you show the diagram of
Yeah,
correlation,
yeah.
I just asked myself, what would be the results? You know, which one is
Yeah.
Improving. I got 2 wrong.
Well, I got one comment from the reviewer saying that, well, if this is a negative landscape time, does it make sense to run an options? Because with a negative landscape type now, negative landscape type here, this is a low environmental values parcels. Then this is a high cost parcels in the negative landscape. Then what we observe in the lab, the bidders offered the parcels on the edge of the landscape because here's a low cost and high environmental values. So the reviewers come back and say, okay, does it make sense when you run this test this negative landscape type? Because we know that it's unlikely that people offer these parcels. So do you run it as a semantic analysis that correlated positive as well? So we was thinking like this when we designed the experiment, because with the when we say negative landscape, because as a designer of often we know that this is negative landscape type, but in the reality, the regulator wouldn't have a really good knowledge whether this is a negative or positive landscape type. And also our work is just like provide some insight that if you face with this landscape type, it's a high likely that you risk the outcome kind of low decrease of spatial coordinations. But when you did it like go further with next step, if you introduce this kind of endogenous bonus, it can somehow help improve the performance. And I'm back to the empirical evidence. I mean, in the reality, there's a lot of research now starting to look at the spatial correlations between these two contextual factors, and they have evidence in the forest conservation area in the US or in South Africa. There's mostly a negatively landscape type correlations, and they observe the other areas, they have another positive landscape. So that's how this research contribute to the literature.
Maybe one last question from Michael.
Yeah.
There's somebody else I wanted to.
Yeah. Let's see.
There's a bit of information you haven't told us about how the design was working with the opportunity cost and the environmental values in those maps. So I'm just wondering whether some of your results might depend actually upon which cells have got which values in, and how those were designed into those maps when you went from the high and the low and the correlated.
So the values for the opportunity cost, we draw a uniform distributions from the values of gross marine agricultural productions in Germany. So it ranges from 200 to 1,500 per euro per hectare.
And then randomly just dropped into the cells?
And then we calculate the degree of spatial correlation using Spearman correlation coefficients. So we drop the values of EV values. So EV here is heterogeneity, but in EV values, but we fix the constant values for each zones. So the values EVs for zone 1 and zone 4 is equal to 200 units of environmental benefit. And this is 100 unit of environmental benefit. Why the distributions of the opportunity cost derive from the values from realities in gross marine from Germany.
So is it possible that when you create one of those designs that you just by chance line up a corridor that just looks as if it could emerge just because of its characteristics? And if I change the design, I'd have got a different. It seems that your definition of success is ability to get corridors turning up.
Yeah.
Ability to get corridors depends upon the configuration of those things, and they're sort of turning up almost. I don't know if they're turning up at random. So I'm just wondering whether some of your outcomes might be design specific as just to which cells just happen to get the high cost, low cost, as they, did they line up by chance? So I don't know whether that, I don't know what the design is. That's so. Yeah.
Yeah. So well, first we have to the first step I did is I compute the coefficients, Spearman correlation coefficients from the values that I draw a uniform distributions from the OC's values and EV values, and then I put into this landscape with its partials, its value. And because the budget here we set a limited budget, and I have to calibrate in such a way that they can come up with the same the outcome that if we run, we assume that every bidder offer their partials equal to the opportunity cost first, then offer 36 partials, every partials in, and offer equal to the OC, so I observe the outcome. So just to make sure that this outcome is equivalent when we change into the positive landscape type and negative landscape type. So we got the same outcome under the same limited budget level, and when the varying the correlations of the landscape. But well, I always with the experimental design. One sentence often said in the paper is this may be due to the artifact of experimental design on the result, and what we can say is only given this setup, the results is like this, but we cannot generalize if you change things in the setup. I cannot say that I'm going to be the same result.
We thank Chi for her presentation and thank you all for coming.